going back to where we were at the end of part 10, yeah, I think we were somewhere in this section here. And I think we had done a recap of 1 to 8. All the interesting stuff there. And what we were doing, because effectively we'd gone round in a big circle. So what we did, we started didn't we, with part 1, for those that were here. And then what we did is that we went into the detail of who the various different characters, extraterrestrials, they're from different groups, different agendas, etc., that is being referred to in these parts. Yeah, I was there, which is here, part 1 and 2. And then what we were doing in part 10 was going back through it to read back through it, yeah, in its entirety, yeah, parts 1 and 2. So then you would then have under maybe into an overstanding of who the characters were, what the agenda was, what was taking place at that time. So the risk of me recapping the whole thing, obviously we'll go back to where we started from at the end of part 10. If things are not clear, ask questions. I'll try and do my best to set some context so people are not lost. Now, I'm doing a bit of reading today, more than maybe what I would do normally, but it just help us to focus and go through. And obviously we're quoting some of the Sabbatic language as well, so you can make note of those tones as we guide things through. Now, if memory serves me correctly, I think we were around about this year. I think it was around about that page there. I think it was around about might be a bit further along than that. Now, let's set some context before I start reading and going through this. And then what we wanted to do a recap of part 1 and then stepping into part 2 just to get into a bit more detail there and then show you some of the things that were going on. So the context was that, which I think we had covered early doors, was in the last 24,000 year cycle. So for people's understanding who have not been on these calls before, when we're talking about our story versus his story, yeah, and our story is also to them prehistory, yeah, so his story, yeah, and also what they refer to as a mystery. But to him it's a mystery. To the mystery to us is my story. You understand? So, and this is basically beyond what would be the 6,000 year period. So one of the reasons which they, as the Mukasu or the Caucasians, who are in control, as I say, of most of the information sources on the planet today, and are seen to be the authority, let's say, in a number of different subjects, as it was given in their Bible. Yeah, their deity gave them dominion, gave Adam, the capability or ability to name things, so they think that they're the authority on many subjects, and the sort of psychology behind that is that in order to be the authority, yeah, you have to have a number of authors. Yeah, so the number of authors you have in a sense, means that you become the authority, and then you decide what or what is not authentic. But obviously in the information age, which is what your ancestors have transformed, so moved from what's referred to as the Piscean era into the era of Aquarius. Yeah, so you've gone from, in their Bible, if you remember, in Matthew chapter 3, yeah, the character named by the name of John the Baptist, an unproven story, by the way, but the character by the name of John the Baptist, yeah, went around, yeah, physically baptizing people with water. Understood? And then by the time you get to the day of Pentecost, understood, they were being baptized with fire. Understood? Yeah, so inspiration. So their character, called that Jesus character, symbolized a shift in the ages. You understand? As you can see, like he multiplied the bread and the loaves of bread, you understand, and fishes. You understand? Fishes obviously tying into the Piscean era. So it's all about cosmology, which we've done other classes around that. Seek out something called Lost Records of Time if you want some more information on that. But it's basically a shifting cycle. So what we're talking about there is the physical era, physical rituals, then being shifted now into the from Pisces to Aquarius, which is basically the era of mind or air, understood? Yeah, which is now what you're living in now, is the era of ether. Prior to that, things would maybe being connected, in your house physically by way of wires. Now, you're connecting things wirelessly, as you would call it, and that is obviously through different types of ether, in a sense, ether being a gas, a type of gas, understood. But for your understanding, let's say in the hereafter doctrine, it's a mechanism that allows energy to transfer from one place to another, and you have different types of ether depending on the type of energy that's being transferred. Understood? So, thoughts, for example, may use mental ether. Understood. You've got heat, light, and sound, for example. Use something called ultra gaseous matter ether. So you've got different types of ether within existence to allow energy to transfer from one to the other. Point being made is that effectively you're in the information age now. So the fact of the matter is that although he was the authority at a certain point, your ancestors made it a case where, particularly for females who were at one time trapped, but more housebound, let's say, and certain rights have only come really in the last sort of 50 years for her to be able to live maybe more autonomously, but they allowed for the technology to develop, which was what we would call the home computer now, understood, along with the internet, so she will be able to make money, understood, and free herself from the bondage of males, obviously, at that time. You understand? So now you can see through this information age, they're no longer the authority, because you can go up and now start to check things that at one time were previously thought to be true, and now you can go and do your own research now, and in ways that would oftentimes obviously seem unimaginable. Now, today, for example, there was a point where you had Blue Letter Bible, different things that broke the Bible down in different languages, same thing like the Quran. So it's uncovering, what was thought to be the truth to see, and what were thought to be miracles and different things of that now are, saying, inferior, or one may describe as basically insufficient for what we're looking at in terms of the modern age. And now with the AI shift, you're able to do even more wonderful things in terms of interrogating subjects and areas. So not that it's not 100% believe, 100% true, but you're able to use your reasoning capabilities, or train the AI to use reasoning capabilities in all various different formats to confirm things in terms of your own research. Understand? So there's nothing really that can't be uncovered. And what it is, when obviously the master teacher came along, that mentality of taking information from multiple sources, you understand, and analyzing it and getting us to see things in a different way, using your inherent tools, but also then some of the what may be described badly, but metaphysical tools, you understand, to see the world how your ancestors would have seen it, or to see the world more from that divine reality's perspective. So truth is one perspective. If you look at the planes within existence, see physical plane, plane of the plane of force, where the weather is controlled from the vitality and food, etc. You have the spiritual plane, you have the mental plane, and you have the plane of divine truth. Understood? But above the plane of divine truth is the plane of divine reality. So things can be true according to a certain perspective, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're real. You understand? So if something's real within existence or within the environment, it won't break down to something else. Do you understand? So something can be broken down to something else, another form or format, then of course it's not really real. You're looking at the illusionary element of this. If somebody looked at yourself as a human, you looked at yourself in the mirror, the human body, well, okay, well, when you die or transition, understood, yeah, that body is going to transform into different elements. This is going to return, say, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So the elements that were from the ground are going to return back there. Do you understand? There's certain things of that nature. It's going to return. So was it real then? If it's going to deteriorate into or transform into other forms at the point where you're not in housing it. You understand? So therefore, once the body sheds, well, what's left? Who are you really then? You understand? So this is where truth is one thing, reality is something else. You understand? And these different layers of how we see the world around us is where our mind needs to be open, because the issue is, one time, as say, there was a class going on, I think in an Islamic degree, and the person asked a question, which it's a natural question to ask, said, well, what about all the drug dealers in the black community destroying lives and such and so on and forth? What do you think about that? How can we stop this? And interestingly enough, the master teacher's response at that time, as Imam Isa said, well, what about all the pastors, preachers, and imams who are giving out bad information? Now, somebody may look at that and think, well, religion is anti sort of crime and those types of things within the community. You might see those as having more positive influence, you understand? Because they're teaching people to be moral, what they describe as good and bad, etc., etc. But the reason why the statement was interesting was because, and obviously, unless we know who we are, we wouldn't necessarily know, well, what damage does bad information cause to a human being? You understand? If you know what you're capable of or who exactly you are, then we would understand the context of why he would say that in that way. Why bad information would be absolutely devastating, understood, for an incarnated soul, obviously trying to progress or trapped on this realm within this human body, and what they need to do to progress outwards or upwards, for lack of a better word, and develop into what they're supposed to be. That information, as I say, is linked to your physical form. As we said, it's linked to your endocrinal glandular system, hence the word endocrine. Obviously, is linked phonetically to the word indoctrinate. Yeah, so bad information changes your physical form, and obviously for us, yeah, agreeable information will transform our physical form into an alignment of what it's supposed to be. So clearly, what happens is there's one type of vibration that they want to release into the world, so oftentimes, isn't it? Because within a society, you generally have, well, in this country or in the UK, for example, you have what they refer to as public bills, and you have private bills. And so public bills is where laws are created or regulations that are created that apply to everybody within the environment, and then you have private bills that only affect some people, obviously within the environment. But they want to try and keep everybody on a similar, vibration. They do talk about obviously making allowances, the fact that people are different, but they talk about it in a kind of sometimes negative way, like diversity. They speak about, isn't it, in that context? But diverse from what? Yeah, so what are you diverting from? That's when we talk about diversity. Who's the original or the source person that people are diverting away from? You understand? That creates this diversity. Obviously, it's them, but they don't want to say that. You understand? So, as they see in themselves as the source people, source information, source who they should live by, and then you have to then justify that your diversity away from them. Do you understand? So this is the issue for us, and this is the issue of information. This is because true can be true to a certain perspective, but when you deal with information, one of the other tests around it being either correct or right is whether it is for or against you. Do you understand? So this is one of the aspects of that kind of knowledge train that people miss off the end. Is it for or against me? You understand? Because if it's against me, then it's not for me, even though it could be, as I say, information that's communicated in a positive way out to the masses. You understand? So when you was in school, for example, I've given this example before, but when you was in school, I said, listen, you need to drink milk, yeah, to get calcium into your body to help with your bone development. But that may be good for certain people, but obviously if you're naturally, you understand, as blacks are, lactose intolerant, then that's bad information for you, isn't it? Even though it's communicated out to the masses, even though in the school system, they used to at one time, they don't do it anymore, but at one time they used to basically deliver milk, yeah, and you drink milk from a bottle as a youngster, yeah, to get into your system, not knowing, obviously, when you start to apply right knowledge and analysis, that the enzymes, obviously, in milk, of course, are designed to make a cow. And a cow is, several times larger than a human being. Understood? So cow's milk, as you know, is for cows. Obviously, our females, insane, produce their own milk for children. And in nature's term, you only have milk for a certain period. You don't have it for, you know what I mean? If you saw a 4 or 5-year-old on a the breast of a woman, you're going to be looking at what's going on there. You understand? It's just looking crazy. So it's only for a set period of time. Do you understand? Maybe first couple of years maximum that you're having milk for. Do you understand what I'm saying? So our milk is designed for our children. Do you understand? But if certain other people may have certain deficiencies, then maybe were made in the making of them, certain animal parts were used, then that, you can say, that information or those nutrients may be beneficial for them, but it's not beneficial for everybody. Do you understand? And so this is what I'm saying. It can be true for one set, but for another set of people, it can be false or it's not reality. You understand? So you're in a day and time now where, as I say, our story now, or there are other sources of information that are going to give another view of what's going on. And so their view is locked into this 6,000 year chronology, nothing past that. Yeah, and obviously starting with the birth of their Adam and their Bible, you understand? But they have words in the language like prehistory. They have words in the language, that take them past those years, but they can't explain it, what's going on before then. But they obviously, their science is now battling against their religion to try and incorporate all their new findings, isn't it? That the scientists are uncovering about things that have taken place before this 6,000 year chronology, or their God or their Adam came into play. So let's look at what we were looking at. So 6,000 years, we were looking at that in terms of the chronology, but then it was going back into the 24,000 year cycle, yet the procession of the equinoxes, and explain to you that every 6,000 years where we get this kind of shifts in consciousness, yeah, each one of those 6,000 years from sun to moon cycle, sun to moon cycle again, each one of those 6,000 years symbolized a new world, you understand, as they would classify it as, where along that period of time, the Nagaru was here prior, or Negroes were here prior, coming into that cycle, but other races started to come along within the last cycle, with the Caucasian coming on, as I say, around 6,000 years ago. Understood? And the fact that, as I say, there were a number of things taking place on the planet that, as I say, had led to an ancient war between extraterrestrials, which basically devastated the surface of the planet and helped to throw it off its axis as well, caused much destruction. And this is what you were reading about in part 1. I was there, which is here, is the being by name of Yaanuwn, expressing I was there, which was here, which was to witness these events. Understood? And then I'm here now to tell you certain things that really took place. Do you understand? Which in their Bible, you see, it has been copied from certain ancient texts like the Enumerations and Gilgamesh epics. You see certain things that allude to it because it's a combination of different stories, in the same that have taken place in the past, merging of different characters. It was never designed to be, say, a book of fact, but rather the word Bible and the word Babel phonetically are linked. You understand? It means confusion. It was designed to confuse. Different calendars are being used in there, so on and so forth. It's not in the right order. Not that there was an original of it, but it's not in the right order, and things are mixed and blended up. And they haven't really, as I say, since their discovery, I think in 1947, in the caves of Qumran, you can look that up, where they found many sort of ancient texts, yeah, that relate to their Bible, which if they were properly released, would even change the order of how certain books are ordered, because you understand that a council of men called the Council of Nicaea, and its various different iterations are called economistical, if I'm pronounced that correctly, councils, and they decide basically what books go in, what books stay out, the order, so on and so forth. Do you understand? But that discovery in the caves of Qumran, yeah, which is basically the Essenes, yeah, really sort of blew up, you know, so the information that they've recorded in their Bible, but they've never really released it properly to the world, and told the truth around it. So you can't trust anything that they put out and say as let's say the fake authority, because when new information comes out, they don't update it so people have got the latest stuff. You understand? So and as you know, they teach the information in a certain way. Yeah, sometimes it's for one's own agenda and to maintain the system. So you have ignorance, and then you have people that are, I suppose, considered to be experts or professionals within a certain arena. So you want to keep the people's knowledge and etc. down at a certain level, so that you can take advantage by, okay, well, I've got to go to this particular person to do this, I've got to go to that person to do that. In the sense they call professionalism. So to keep the economy and money going. But obviously now with the internet, information sources, now even with AI, you know, there's less of that required or needed, because you can, in certain instances, you can just go to the information direct and read it yourself, and if you've got enough confidence, apply it in the context. So we were looking at our story in this context, and basically what you're seeing on screen here, where we got to, I believe, or slightly, I think we've gone a bit further than this, there were a number of different, because the wars that taken place, based on a certain group of extraterrestrials called the Draconians, reptilian in nature, moreover, but also have a humanoid version of them referred to the Annuna. And as I say, they use another group of extraterrestrials who people be more familiar with, sort of blonde-haired, blue-eyed group of extraterrestrials referred to as the Pleiadians. That was their food source. Understood? So highly, you understand, technologically proficient, of course, able to travel intergalactically, but they were a food source for these reptilians. And so they tried to graft, or sought to graft, excuse me, a Adamite, you understand, yeah, red and ruddy Adam, into this environment, excuse me, using the genes here to create an alternative food source, obviously. So if they could create this Caucasian, that would be the food, and they wouldn't have to be the food. You understand? They could use them as breed them as almost like a farm, understood, and they would be the food for these Draconians. Now, obviously, they're coming to this particular planet, running amok, not respecting the let's say the galactical order that's in place. They're here unauthorized. They're doing breeding in an unauthorized way, not approved. Excuse me, by Natharu and those who control, um, this galaxy within this planetary system, etc. So unauthorized breeding, unnatural breeding, along with the system, and so others coming in to hunt, doing all types of madness. So they're leaving dead bodies around the place, leaving unburied bodies, different things of that nature. They're moving wild, much like you might find certain groups of people running amok on a Friday and Saturday night or whatever, and leaving town centres. Yes, what? Excuse me. Worse for wear. Yeah, they're seen like as an infestation into the environment. So the combination of these issues meant that basically it was getting too much. Yeah, so they sought to wipe out these draconians by diseasing this food source. Yeah, through something called leproma or leprosy, through this Adamite individual or earthling, the grafted being that they were trying to use as a food source, and they worked with ourselves as the ancient Egyptians, excuse me, and also the Pleiadians, in the sense with the Natharu coming together and diseased this food source, and it killed a number of obviously the Draconians, which led to an ancient war in the skies that took place, which, as I say, devastated this planet. You see evidence of that around about 12,000 BC onwards. And why one of the reasons why the planet particularly has veered more off of its axis, not that it's the only cause, but it's more off of its axis. Why, as I say, the majority of us are right-handed, do you understand? Because where we were on the planet when these events were taking place. So, number of dead bodies as a result of these wars taking place, nuclear fallout, you understand, which blocked out the sun. So the planet went through a lot of turmoil, as were the people went out with a lot of turmoil. And why a lot of these ancient sites, for example, they're pyramidal sites, ancient sites which were previously powered, yeah, when the planet was on a different type of axis, because that axis now has been was moved off. Now it's 17.5 degrees overstood. Yeah, it threw these monuments out of alignment with the stars or the cosmic energy that powered them. Today, obviously, from a technological point of view, we understand how to use the power from one sun. We call it solar panels, for example. Some of you may have them, and you use that energy to power electrical systems, of course, within your home. Understood? But back then, we were able to use power, the energy from multiple suns, in the sense of cosmic energy coming from stars, suns, black holes, etc., and utilize that power to power, as I say, certain monuments and technology here on the planet Earth. There's an old cartoon, in fact, in the 80s. There's an old cartoon, I think, in the 80s, I think it was. Called Visionaries. Some of you might remember it, and it was a similar kind of concept where basically certain planets or whatever or came into alignment, and it caused basically the technology at the time to be stopped because the power that they were receiving from these cosmic entities basically stopped, and so they reverted back to a you know how they do in these fantasy cartoons, whatever, but they reverted back to a magical age. You understand? And so, in a similar way, um, when the planet is thrown off of alignment. So if our planet was thrown off of alignment now, for example, you would see that things like your satellite navigation, a lot of apps on your phones that do location, etc., they would cease to work. Yeah, because it's based on a certain configuration. There was a power drop, I think, the other day in Europe, where several countries lost power. Yeah, total blackouts of power. They were scrambling around to try and get power back on. So, and this is to do with the solar flares, you understand, being emitted by the sun. Sun's a living entity, same like women go through menstrual cycles and uh, what's the other thing? Menstrual cycles and menopause, yeah, different things of that nature, which are cyclical, yeah. So within a certain age period or time period, linked to, obviously, if you're talking about menstrual cycle, 4 phases of the moon. So planet goes through its own cycles, yeah, every 10 years, and the sun goes through certain cycles every 10 years. And one of those cycles is emission of solar energy called solar flares. And that the massive amount of electromagnetic energy that basically gets expelled from the sun sends solar flares to the planet, and it basically disrupts, yeah, the ability to generate electrical energy, do you understand? And all of our things that linked into telecommunications, satellites, etc., can be knocked out by these, let's say, large emissions of energy. Remember, the sun is, although it's a smaller sun in the context of our galaxy, but the planet Earth still fits into it around 1.1 million times. That's how big it is. Understood? So when it has these emissions, obviously it causes serious issues, of course, on the planet. And remember, we're only using about 1% of that solar energy. So imagine those emissions that the sun is generating, about 1% of it's needed to heat the planet. Do you understand? Any more than that, the life on the planet would be, well, in fact, the balance would be crazy. Do you understand? In terms of being able to sustain life as it stands at the moment. So any emissions, obviously, you see happening. Can knock out many of the systems because of technologically where we're at, and so makes us vulnerable. Understood? And so this is what we're seeing here at the moment. So nonetheless, getting back to it, we're speaking about this alignment of is why certain monuments on the planet don't work anymore, because the planet was at a different configuration, and so energy that we would have received from these cosmic entities is different now. So therefore, they either don't work, or they would work when the planet is in a certain position or rotation. So maybe when it's in a certain orbit, at a certain time of the year, or in a certain cycle. Understood? And this is one of the reasons why, because of those events, a new calendar was created, understood, referred to as a Dendora star map, to then track where this energy was coming from, which then leads to the sort of fake knowledge, which is to do with astrology, which is where it should be based on astronomy. You understand? And so this is why our star map was then created, not with 12 constellations, but dealing with 24 constellations, because each of the 12 had a good and bad, agreeable and disagreeable, let's say, side. And so this is tracking energies that come to the planet. So then you are aware that, as we talked about at the start of the class, you get this shift in energy, which changes the nature and vibration of, planet of surface life forms, as well as subsurface life forms on the planet. Do you understand? And so this energy, or science, is talked about. It's called solar biology. Yeah. So how solar power affects biological systems on the planet, versus also lunar biology, how lunar energy affects biological systems on the planet. Understand? So this obviously on the planet by way of seasons. Yeah. Summer, autumn, spring, and winter, isn't it? Yeah. And all that's to do with, isn't it? It's to do with the axis of the planet. If you study how seasons work, it's to do with the axis of the planet. Understood? When there was perpendicular axis, we didn't have 4 seasons, we had 2. So this is moods of vibrational energy based on the angular proximity or plane of proximity that we are to certain solar bodies. And obviously on a larger scale in ancient times, the constructed buildings enabled us to make use of that. And it shifted in this time period. And because of that shift, of this war that was taking place, caused tremendous amount of explosions, huge climatic changes, etc. And a lot of people died. So over a number of thousands, several thousands of years. And what it was, obviously, with this war taking place in the skies between these different groups of extraterrestrials, much like today, the people couldn't see what was the cause of it. It's not like there's tremendous ships in the sky that are basically, they can see them sort of fighting in the skies amongst each other. You couldn't see what was going on. You're hearing explosions, seeing lightning, different types of things. So they're warring with each other in the skies using these weapons, but not visible to the people. So there was a lot of confusion and fear around that, because they couldn't see or characterize why this was happening. Do you understand, if that makes sense? So let's step through these particular verses and see where that. So a lot of dead bodies in the environment, and basically the us Ionotep and the great alchemists out of Adamite matter, ancient Egypt, basically grafted this animal together, like you'll be familiar with the cat, the rat, and the dog. You understand? To create the swine or the sow or pig, and that was designed basically to clean up this filth of these dead bodies that have been left in the environment for various reasons. But obviously, the wind carries diseases. So even if you sort of say, well, then people live over there and I'm going to live over here, if they don't manage the environment properly, then in the sand, the wind is going to carry disease into your neck of the woods. And obviously, if you inherit that bacteria, it's going to cause disease in your environment. So there was a necessity to basically civilize others to live maybe in a certain way, go up and clean up things around them, you know, saying because of the best interest of maintaining the environment, something that was our responsibility back then and should be now. However, we've been caught up in 9 to 5 and other different things, not catering for the environment like we once did. So let's take it from we'll take it from 92. Yeah, and it says Torah, yes, they lost that attack fight in respect to this war with the Draconians on the adverse side, let's say, and the Riskians and the Pleiadians and others fighting really against them. But 200 of their children, so reading their Genesis chapter 6 story, talking about in the story of it, the sons of God came down and mixed in with the daughters of men, as they record it. But in the Sumerian tablets, understood, a group of these Anunnaki or extraterrestrials came down and mixed in with what they're referring to as these daughters of Eve, or these fair women or Caucasian women that they bred with, in a sense, and created in a sense men of renown, understood, but they were sort of a seed really that was out of control, in a sense, had an insatiable appetite not only for flesh, animal flesh, but eventually for human flesh, and they had to get these under control. So part of the punishment, because the being that you known as Enlil, who is the sort of Lord God or Baal of their biblical stories there, did not agree with human beings intermixing, not agree with Anunnaki or Annuna, I should say, to keep their bloodline pure, intermixing with human beings that they'd created. Do you understand? So this set or group of Adamites that they'd created, as far as they saw them as, it's like us looking at mating ourselves with a chimpanzee, you understand, or animal, how they looked at that lower life form at that particular point, it would seem to be they saw them as lower life form. So this was a denigration of their seed, as they would see it at. This is why in the Holy Tablets, which is, I say, the bridge between religion and reality, they describe those stories in chapter 5 and chapter 2 as well, with a being by the name of Jeshtu. You understand? And the way they describe it in those ancient tablets, they describe that he was slain. You understand? And so if you would read that literally, you think, oh, he was killed. But it's not that he was killed or slain. What it was, he was the guy, who they were going to use his genes to mix in with certain groups of simian, understood, to create this, Adamite. We come from a different lineage, so it's not. We came out of the seas of this planet. We weren't mixed with simians, certainly not on our original creation. So they were mixing with they call Homo erectus, in a sense, to create Homo sapien. So by mixing their genes with this lower life form, it was seen as it was like the death of their or this individual seed. You understand? So that's what the Holy Tablets in chapter 2 and 5 speak about. And there were 16 versions before they got to one that was yeah, was what they would describe as perfected. Do you understand? So that's the sort of Adam and Eve story there. And what was interesting about that as well is because um, there's a discussion taking place, I think, earlier this week in another forum that was dealing with natural and unnatural. And one of the things that's quite interesting is that basically the Holy Tablets introduce a concept to us in that way, where the description of male and female coming together, where yeah, one uses the phallus to insert into the female's vaginal area, and that deposits the sperm in order to produce a child, was described as artificial insemination in the tablets. You understand? So this is showing that from a technological point of view, male and female interaction in that way was not natural. Do you understand? It was artificial, but obviously the technological advancement where they're able to program things at a DNA at a cellular level, yeah, to make things work, means that that's how it's reflected. Do you understand? So we would say, well, we would consider that to be natural, isn't it? As we would describe it to be, as opposed to maybe something like a same-sex situation, for example, we would describe that as natural, but in actuality, it's artificial insemination, because in actuality, when you think about a male-female interaction, the sperm is deposited into the female. Obviously, it triggers her immune system to block or destroy those sperm. And then she has to create what is referred to as an amniotic sac in order to protect her own child from her own immune system. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so therefore, if it was naturally occurring, then why doesn't everything sync together? It's because of obviously the way in which the rules of the environment have been understood, and then you've technologically created a solution in order to allow certain groups of human beings to reclone themselves. Do you understand? But originally, if you remember, the woman was able to reclone herself because she was a hermaphrodite by nature, and the Bartholing glands either side of the vaginal orifice secreted a seminal type fluid that basically fertilized her own eggs. You understand? So she was able to reclone herself, what they call parthenogenesis or virgin birth. But when men were created, then men were the outlier. Yeah, the outlier. Hence the word manifestation or man infesting the planet, because now you've had to introduce this artificial form or way of doing things. You understand? And so therefore now, yeah, you've got to work within the rules of nature. Hence why, as I say, there are opposition with each other in terms of that context. 1 second, Jeff. One moment, everybody. Just 1 moment. So I'm back. Yeah. So the man, obviously, or the male form. Remember, the Bartholing gland of the female. Remember, is now externalized into the phallus of the male in terms of that principle. Do you understand? So it's been taken out of her as a dual gendered being and then placed into an external form as a male or man, and then the phallus or the penis becomes a delivery mechanism for the sperm, isn't it? Do you understand? And so since male or male as a protector of the woman, it is now an external form outside of herself. So you can see from a technological point of view how, depending on your level of science, let's say, how people are able to manipulate or design things, as I say, at a DNA, cellular, you understand, at level, you understand, to create new life forms. Understood? Whereas today, the level of technology means that, people are not programming always on the a sort of genetic level. It's more external level. You understand, robots. You understand, tech outside, rather than working with, sort of natural nature in that regard. I'm not saying that all technology is like that, but that's sort of where we're at. But obviously now, with the advent of cloning, with the advent of stem cells and other things of that nature, then obviously you can see that being used. But the problem with stem cells is that you get undesignated stem cells or pure stem cells from fetuses. So the question is where they're getting the fetuses from to, for this stem cell research. Obviously, either growing them in a lab or using semen and embryos of somebody, to produce these fetuses, because that's where you get stem cells from that they say to be grown in a lab. So there's obviously ethical consideration around that type of stuff. Do you understand? Which is unfortunately the nature of certain individuals. Is to prey on others for their survival. You understand? This is obviously some of the things that we're reading about here. All right, let's get into the reading of this. Any questions? Can't see any hands up at the moment, so we'll crack on. So what does it say here? It says 92. Tua, yes, they lost the Latak battle, and only 200 of their Kharadu children, offspring, remained on Earth. So part of that punishment of mixing their seed, because they were looking at these daughters of men or fair women, as they thought the human beings, they look good, and basically went down there and then they raped these particular women. But as I say, their boss, Enlil, Nunamir, son of Anu, basically drew punishment on them for that, and they were trapped here as discarnate entities. You understand? So here spiritually, but don't have a physical body to interact with the environment. You understand? So they're in here, trapped, overstood, but don't have a physical body to interact with the environment. But seemingly have been responsible for a lot of troublemaking since the time that they've been trapped here. Understood? So it says their offspring remained here on Earth. 93. All Nagaru Negroids were ordered not to mix their seed with Caucasu Caucasoids or their offspring, for if by a Caucasoid, a Yash male, it will be a wild and unruly, a wild ass of man's kind. So obviously this Caucasian at that time that they sort of developed, understood, was uncivilized, you understand? And as you sort of more read about at that sort of time as well, their own ancestors or their own extraterrestrial overlords were not able to control them. Do you understand? And so, eventually they sort of left and said, "So we had enough of this. Do what you're doing. We're out." You understand? So, if we're sort of reading between the lines, you understand? But this is why, because this was a wild individual, wild beast, not able to be controlled. This is why you have man's kind, understood, and not man. And there's a difference between man's kind or kind of man and man, which on their fake moon landing, if you look at what Neil Armstrong said, isn't it? He said one small step for man, but one giant leap, isn't it, for mankind? Because man, which would be the Dravidian or the Hindu, in their Upanishads, isn't they talk about craft ships, understood, extraterrestrial involvement with extraterrestrials, and saying, see their big major temples, etc., that are built in that environment. So they had from their own sort of overlords, or obviously they tie back into the Anunnaki. If you look at the headdress of sort of Enki and Enlil, when you see a depiction, their pictures in the tablets or whatever, they're wearing what we would describe today as turbans. You understand? Look at Enkidu and others where depicted, you see their headdress, it looks like turbans. You understand? So that ties in, or some of the influence, let's say, with the Dravidian culture, not solely, but some of the influence from the Dravidian culture and the caste system and certain things like that. Highly patriarchal. All these is a lot of this is Anunnaki influence, as well as I say, some of the things that they worship, like Ganesh. You see a being, a blue being, isn't it, with multiple arms. It's got the trunk of the trunk of an elephant, for example, things of that nature. Well, this is evidence of basically graftation projects and extraterrestrial experimentation that was taking place on the planet. And rather than to kill off things that they were messing around with, where they're crossbreeding, etc. They just let things run wild in the environment. And so instead of cleaning up their rubbish, so to speak, or taking out particular individuals, so they just leave them to run amok in the environment. Um, but then human beings, knowing that these things have been created by people who can come here from wherever they are, but we can't leave here and go to wherever they are. They're seeing that those people as divine. You understand? Beings of higher power, and then obviously now because they know that, they start to worship that which they've created. And now you're obviously living in a more modern time, and so movies and different things, different type of knowledge or whatever. You would see, okay, well that's you would understand, well that's the evidence of different types of experimentation, or that's the result of this. It's not divine. It's groups of extraterrestrials or whatever coming down, doing the same way we might crossbreed or have animals in a lab to try and solve a particular problem, whether that's developing new medicines or new ways of doing things, because we see their life forms as inferior to our own, so therefore, we see we can experiment on them for our benefit. That's the mindset, isn't it? So but for beings dealing with on an interplanetary level, then they may be looking at certain human beings in that way, as well as animals on the planet. So it's a different mindset, isn't it? When the bubble that we're looking at starts to expand wider than our own planet. You understand? So nonetheless, what's it saying here? It's saying that basically we were told at that time not to mix in with this man's kind, you understand, or to coerce our genes into that, because, as I say, this made man, by way of crossbreeding Pleiadian genes, as you know, Anunnaki genes, and also simian genes that have a chimpanzee, had created this wild ass man's kind. You understand? DUF 1220 is the scientific name, which you spoke about, I think, in part 10, if you want more information about that. Now, 94, it says, the great alchemists were after another kind of beast to eat up their filth, 95, grafted a rodent, feline, and a canine to breed. It was called the Khazar, swine of sow and hog, so male and female of the pig, So grafted animal. So one of the reasons why a lot of cultures in the East, particularly African cultures, we don't eat pork. But as the master teacher explained in some of those true light classes, it was a joke, isn't it, for the Caucasian to feed us pork during slavery, which we then obviously tried to make the best of the situation, and then he made it a joke, isn't it, our ancestors made it a joke for them to give us watermelon, not knowing that the watermelon, had properties in it that helped to flush out some of the things like the trichina worm and all that in pork to flush our systems. You understand? So you see, the joke is in their ancient stories, isn't it? This particular animal was used, to clean up filth, and then used it, I suppose, to feed us, and then denigrate our genetics and genes. You understand? By having us feeding us stuff that obviously was very adverse to our development. And obviously, you are what you eat, isn't it? So obviously, clearly, this disease of an animal would affect our genes, and all of this stuff. Obviously, it helps us. Stops us from our ability to connect with our higher ancestors. You understand? When the body in that way is diseased. So over a number of generations, we have to keep cleaning ourselves, isn't it? From a lot of the stuff that was done to us over that 400-year cycle. You understand? Changing us from what we were, and this is the part of what you became stuff, because the Negro was created, isn't it? A black person who is devoid of the connection back to their ancient past, isn't it? So you've got a black person who wants to live in the image and after the likeness of his Caucasian master in the sand, but is effectively mentally dead. So the mental connection that would link us, remember we talked about that mental reservoir earlier, was cut off. You understand? So his soul, or our soul, yeah, as you understand, animists, yeah, our soul was cut off. Yeah, so our connection was cut off. This is how the soul can be restored, is because the connection can be restored. Yeah, the soul, as described in the Old Tablets in chapter, is described as the obviously it's the mental connection expressing itself on the fourth plane of existence, which it says you call it soul. It says you call it soul, but that doesn't mean necessarily what it is, but it's that projection down from the mental, yeah, down to the fourth plane. As I said, when it's seen or perceived, we refer to that as a soul, but it's our connection. Interesting enough, the Parnatharu will not manifest down below the fourth level of existence. You understand, that mental reservoir. It won't come down to spiritual plane of force or physical, well, not unless, as say in this instance, where they design a body, yeah, to then in-house, yeah, to be born amongst us, to learn who we are, yeah, so that we're not disconnected when they apply whatever solution needs to be developed to fix their children. Do you understand? But it's not something that they would inherently just come down and manifest below plane four. So we have to rise up as a will manifest down to that certain level. The point is that we were cut off from that. You understand? That's why you saw in the mummy movies, yeah, Boris Karloff, old school horror movies, yeah, with the mummy that's buried, and symbolically what used to happen is that the person was buried and they cut out their tongue in the movies. Yeah, people be familiar with that, or you can look it up. It's to cut out the person's tongue. Well, if a person's being buried alive, yeah, and then the mummy obviously rises. Remember, they raise the mummy back up or whatever, and then the mummy comes out and then starts killing everybody, seeking revenge. But they were buried initially, and their tongue was cut out. You understand? Well, if you're going to bury somebody alive, no one can hear them. So what's the purpose of cutting out their tongue? Do you understand? But it's symbolic of you. Yeah, your tongue, your tones were removed. Your tones is how we connect into natural nature. Those tones help to align our you understand, our informational body, do you understand, to allow it to have outformational connection once again. Do you understand? That's the transformation. So speaking our own language, or being gifted back our own language, is obviously how we link back in tonally. You understand? It's relying us again, just because speaking the right language, yeah, and then that's connecting us or opening up us back to those nine ether frequencies, or at least 7, 8, and 9 ether frequency ranges will always be of our own ancestors. You understand? Obviously, 6 and below is not. So when we're connecting or sending those messages in, we're going to make sure, one, that we direct our energy to the right places and we're connecting to the right places, but also want to avoid interference from other forces which may seek to in-house a network and divert our energies away, their own nefarious or ethic benefit, because you're the one with the energy. So if you direct your energy to empower me, that's how I can get the energy to subsist. You understand? So you're there for food for the fodder if you are in a state of ignorance. Yeah. Okay. So just checking, just drop me a message that the internet was unstable. If you can't hear me, just drop a note in the that you can hear me okay, that this sound's not checking out. So the last time created with the help of some of the scientists, Imhotep, etc., from ancient Egypt. Now, if you want more information, seek out a book, 18 plus 18 plus 1, 13 to the mitochondrial DNA. Obviously, this is condensed, but between Imhotep, Inky, I'm in the Matrix now, yeah, indeed. So between Imhotep and Inky, you understand, or Nunamia, they devised a way to basically hide the disease within the DNA of circular DNA, mitochondrial DNA, so that basically it wouldn't be detected by high-level instrumentation that was able to scan the food or scan this man's kind, the bodies of these Caucasians, and detect that disease within the body. Obviously, as they would clean up this particular food. Do you understand? And so they found a way basically to hide this disease or programming at a dimensional level within the mitochondrial DNA. And what it meant is that they could then trigger it in from another dimension for the disease then to express itself. Do you understand? So it would defeat their scanning technology. And so that same technology is utilized in a similar way with different human beings, I suppose, on the planet, where it can trigger shifts in what we probably would be described as evolution. You understand? Yeah. So you can trigger certain steps or changes, and we've seen that obviously throughout the ages. For example, 50,000 years ago, women were women spoke first, you understand, with the development of the sort of Foxbox Pro gene, 2 gene, you understand, which developed complex speech, obviously in females first. Males drew first. Prior to that, obviously, as human beings, our language obviously coming out of the waters, as you can see, it's a proper name for it, but I think the Caucasian mispronunciation is Quaison. You understand, which is like a clicking language you see in South Africa, understood. But that was more, as I say, less sophisticated speech that we had as coming out of the waters, for many millions of years. We spoke in that kind of clicking language. But as I say, there's a shift in development within our genes that then meant, as I say, they're able to develop more complex speech patterns as a result of that. So there's a whole thing in there that you can read about, saying 18 plus 1 of how, as I say, they hid, the disease in there, but it's also a mechanism, as I say, to trigger genetic shifts for advancement within human beings from other dimensions, not in the one that they would be residing within. You understand? So 96 to Naduf, clean up the Mawat death, disease, Jasad, flesh of caves, hillsides of the northeast Asia among the human beasts. 97. These Shakhasu people could not live under the sun's rays, so they retreated back into the Shayuda, constructed mountains or Mabnayat, buildings and dwellings to hide from the Bashir direct rays of the sun, lest become Khaleh, sick, and even Muwat, die. 98. Launa Mubras, first leper, had to hide until he could mix his seed with the Tahir Salau pure race, Nagaru Negroids. 99. So as you mortals stood in the midst of renewal and regeneration, 100. You Wajuda found this Jadad, new earth, firm, and heaven, Saluha, fixed, when you came forth from behind the waterfalls to the south, the places of refugees. So here we can see that basically when these wars were taking place, certain groups of extraterrestrials sought to try and retain, you understand, or keep their lineage safe from destruction. In the case of ourselves, the Ptaro was that we went behind waterfalls where large caverns, you understand, in order to survive or be able to survive. These certain calamities that were taking place, which is a similar thing that took place in ancient times. When there's large meteorite strikes and things that have taken place, overstood, we've gone beneath waterfalls or in subterranean environments, large caverns, when the surface of the planet was not safe to live. Now, if I switch my screen for a second, let's just see if we can. Yeah, let's switch our screen for a second. And so you can see, I don't know if you can see the screen here. You can see one of these locations, for example, yeah, in Turkey, yeah, if we can see there, yeah, see this place here called Durinkuyu. It's probably a bit choppy where you are. Let me just try and smooth that out for you. So we smooth that out for you. Yeah, I hope that's a bit smoother. Yeah, ignore the block. I will get rid of that in a second. But you can see this place called Derinkuyu, yeah, underground city. Yeah, you can look that up in your own time. But if we just click in, just to see this place in Turkey, we can see that there's a whole underground city basically developed, very sophisticated, yeah, groups of tunnels, you know what I'm saying, built by extraterrestrials to retain this mankind seed. Do you understand? So different places around the world, but in particular, this particular location is what they're describing as where these Pleiadians have tunneled out in the same highly sophisticated environments that enables, you know, people to live there en masse. But part of the challenge or the issue is that, you know, this man's kind wasn't necessarily taking care of their you know, hygienic practices, you know, burying of the dead, so on and so forth. So when they emerged from these caves, yeah, there was a lot of cleanup work that had to be done. Understood? Now, if you also look, I suppose, well, in your own time, you can look at these large caverns, obviously placed in South Africa or in the southern region of Africa, not just the country of South Africa, but more towards the south. You can see large caverns, large caves, some obviously behind waterfalls. You know, how many people they'll be able to I'm going to say how many people they'll be able to sustain is different in different locations, but you can see that these caverns were used, as I say, to provide some protection against, as I say, some of the difficult environment, you know, post-war environment that was prevalent on Earth. Do you understand? So, underground cities, you can look up these. I think in Ancient Aliens, there's a lot of stuff to speak about this type of thing, but highly sophisticated. You know, yeah, certainly even those humans of that time, you know, it would be difficult to describe how they were able to excavate, yeah, the type of, you know, solid rock faces and create an environment, remember, where air is circulating, of course, down from the surface into these underground areas. Today, if you think about it, when people are doing mining and other types of things, yes, they're, you know, they're a highly sophisticated piece of equipment, air pumps and things like that that are able to take air from the surface, pump it underground to allow us to, you know, allow people working in that environment to breathe correctly. Here, you're seeing autonomous environments where the air is able to flow from the surface, you know, deep underground and sustain people living there. Who built it? What was the purpose? You know, that type of thing. That too much things are left unexplained. You understand? Why would you want to live on the surface as a human being, as underground, as opposed to living on the surface? Yeah, as a human being. And so it's much easier to get to everything if you're on the surface than living underground. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this is the issue that you're seeing described here. And as I say, it's just almost like sort of washed away in the background, isn't it? It's hidden knowledge of how, you know, these groups of people, why were they living underground? What was the purpose? So on and so forth. Do you understand? So this is where our story then starts to explain or provide some context, yeah, to how certain things arose in this regard. Yeah. But yeah, do some research. Look up some of these large caverns, as I say, in Africa, other places around the world, but certainly in Africa, South Africa, some connected to waterfalls, others not. that we're seeing described here. And so, as I say, when we've emerged out, yeah, after this in this sort of 6,000 year cycles, you can see that the world around us is different to how we knew it to be. Yeah. So it says here, you Wajuda found this Jaded, excuse me, new earth firm and the heaven Saluha fixed where you can find the waterfalls, places of refugee. So we're saying about the sky being because these wars created nuclear fallout. Yeah, and so what that's really describing is that basically dust gets when there's large explosions or which we're going to see a bit later, but sort of these great balls of fire hitting the earth in the same which appear to be meteorites but are not. Yeah, it throws dust into the atmosphere. The dust then blocks out the sun, which creates what they refer to as a sort of, if it was nuclear weapons that causes this, they would say nuclear winter. But it creates a winter because the sun rays are not able to reach the surface of the planet because they're blocked by so much dust into the atmosphere. Do you understand? We're not getting the sun rays coming through and heating, and it creates winter-like conditions. You understand? For many, many decades before basically the air is purified enough to start letting the sun's rays back in, and then obviously provide surface heat. So it says, you looked up that Jaladut above, and the Khawaf fear, for you lived in dread, having not seen the real cause that the heavens would again bring forth the awful Sahamat powers of destruction lurking there, the great balls of fire. And we talked about it earlier about not seeing what caused human beings on the surface, not seeing what caused this destruction. 102. So henceforth, the placid Jalad skies would hold a terrifying secret. 103. Part to power the world your Salafu ancestors had known was gone forever. 104. The surface of the ground was Rayura, transformed, changed. The axis shifted and the Jaway weather not the same. 105. The fertile land now used to be desert to the north. And so you can see one of the questions is that, or some people asked questions in the past pertaining to, well, how did you end up in a situation where we can see like where Egypt is today, for example, how the Arabian desert, yeah, which at one time that land was fertile. Why did the desert appear there? And so one of the things that is the issues is you've got meteorites or large meteorite-like objects crashing into each other within the Earth's environment, you understand, and creating these large, obviously dust filled areas or sand areas covering large-scale environments, but yet underneath that is or was at one time greenery or fertile land. So this is some of the transformation or change that happened, but also caused people then to have to migrate away from certain areas that they were on the planet and then move to other areas of the planet because what was once fertile was no longer so, clearly. And as I say, a lot of things that were previously there were not there any longer. So human beings were forced them to migrate and move. Now, so 106. I think someone's put a comment in about the series 100. Yeah, I'm familiar with that sci-fi series. Yeah, a good watch. And to finish it. But yeah, very true, very true. I think in some of the later seasons, that's to find a way to live underground for a certain period. Yes, that is correct. Before um, I think the nuclear conditions basically had I'm going to say, subsided, yeah, so it was safe then again to breathe normal air on the surface. 106. You were a generation that groped in desolate and gloom of dry land and deserts. Yet the great Mararatat pyramids built by your Salafu ancestors still stood strong. 107. Time passed, memories are tuma dimmed, and the Sajal record of events was no longer clear. So, again, we talked about this earlier, effectively, that how we have lost our memory of the past. And so there's like whole swathes of, you understand, thousands of years into millions of years of our story, yeah, or the human story that's missing. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it's amazing, you know, why how come we don't know these certain things? And as I say, we talked earlier about people is trying to establish themselves as the authority on the planet. Well, you can see when certain this wild ass of man came along 6,000 years ago, their strategy or stratagem, you understand, was to wipe out previous historical records to establish a modern era. You understand? And as we've explained in this class before, the word modern through etymology, remember, ties back into mode. So instead of us being able to see the holistic view of the thing, they want you to tie you into a certain mode, yeah, of out of that 360, which is their story, isn't it? The word modern, they're the condensed version. So they destroyed, you know, our ancient records, the library in Alexandria, one of the greatest record keeping facilities that the world has ever seen, maybe even the greatest. You understand? And we've seen what they've done to places like Iraq and other places. The level of bombing is to destroy certain records that basically talk about these ancient truths. Yeah, these ancient records, in the sense that you can maintain, yeah, your modern events and no one can get to see, well, actually, that your story is that you were food. Yeah, your story is that you were created, not what I say, that's what the records say. Your story is that you were created as food, a food source, and that certain of your people were used as ancient weaponry, you understand, to take out, yeah, these Draconians, yeah, who were feeding off of you as that food source. So you when it says, because oftentimes there were books in the previous, in the first 8 years saying he is a disease, he is this, he is that, and it was taken like, okay, if somebody just read it on the surface, they're looking at it like, oh, what, damn, this is just kind of racist. It's kind of hateful. But no, it's dealing with the facts of, you understand, the ancient records. They was created to be a disease, a weapon in that sense. This is why what's interesting to say, we've sort of mentioned this before, but that movie Alien, if you really look at it, the symbolism of the movie is talking about, really, the alien is really the Caucasian race. Do you understand? And if you look at the movie Prometheus, you understand, I think we touched upon it in the early parts of this class, wasn't it? Yeah. And showed you, well, they were looking for their gods, isn't it? Their deity. And then when they woke one of them up or took this particular god or whatever out of hibernation, when he looked at them, his immediate reaction was not, "Hey, you're my children." It was, "Let me kill you." So that was because he saw who they were. Symbolically, do you understand? It was they are that parasitical race, you understand, which must feed off of others in order to survive. You understand? So if you look at the alien movies and you remove sort of all the drama and the special effects, that's what it's related to. You understand? And actually, what was that? What was the? I think they trashed the second movie of that Prometheus film, maybe on purpose, because the first one was just too much. It was too much truth in that particular movie. So sometimes, they trash the sequel to it. Uh, when it was really supposed to go deep into, they've made it about the android and all that kind of stuff. But actually, if you look at not only the film, but look up the title Prometheus, then you'll see it's alluding to some of these ancient stories that we've covered now. So it says, time passed, memories utterly dimmed, and the Sajal record of events was no longer clear. 108, generation followed generation, and as the ages unfolded, new tongues and new tales replaced the Sadakat truths. 109, the Muhashu, liars, made up from his story to Rashush, deceive you from knowing that you came to this Kawak planet from Sa'at, Orion males, and Sabatat, Sirius females, to Nagud, rule and lead one under the deities, yeah, Mukhnashatu, excuse me, Mukhnashtatu and Mukhnashu, hermaphrodites and hermaphrodites, yeah, the Pa Mufadu, Shalel Pa Bawabat, the guardians of the gateways, gatekeepers to the vibration of the world of Akaf, ether. So obviously, as it was touched upon in the sorry, one moment. Back again. So yeah, as it was stated, I think we covered a little bit in the Partakyud, the affirmation, where it talked about Ptah, yeah, or giving some respect, yeah, to Ptah. So when so our original home is the Sirius star system. Do you understand? We probably ain't going to get into it. I say it's going to go into a part two of this, but we'll start to get into maybe I'll just look at some of the Dogon story and the connection there. But obviously, in these early parts of this, we were showing the connection obviously to Sirius C star system, you understand, and the collapse in relation to that. But that's where it originally came from, and this is why you can see a lot of our ancient monuments, yeah, are linked. Understood, particularly the Giza pyramids. They are linked, isn't it, through the King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber. Queen's Chamber leads to the Sirius star constellation. The King's Chamber leads to the Orion star constellation, understood? And then you've got another chamber leading to Draco. Yeah, so this is one of the things that within our story, see, the issue for them is that their history started when they started to write things down. Understood? So in the beginning, yeah, God did this. Yeah, so the pen is giving their validity to their story. You understand? Their myths, legends, etc., understood, and so is to do with the pen, understood. But your story or our story, yeah, the reason why it becomes irrefutable is because it's written in the genes. Yeah, this is why you can see a correlation between you and the planet Earth. You understand? I mean, the liquids in the body equate to the same fractional rate, you understand? Yeah, as what's in the body. 71% liquid in the body, 29% solid, similar to that combination of the planet. The fact of you are a bioelectrical being, understood, and one of the ways in which to maintain that electricity in your system is salinity or salt. They don't have enough salt in your system, you're going to cease to function correctly. When you're in the hospital and they're trying to rehydrate a person, they don't just put water in that, the stereotypical fluid sac that sits above you. It's called saline. What's saline? Saline is salt water. You understand? Because we came from the seas of this planet. So the reality is that the correlation as above, so below, is showing you that our stories are written in your genetics. You understand? This is the proof. Yeah, these are the facts. The fact that, yeah, you're black and when you look up at the so-called night sky in the environment of called space, it's not white, is it? It's black. Blackness, that's what things grow out of. You understand? So your story or our story is in our genes. This is why it's irrefutable. Their story, no proof. They can't prove that Jesus existed. They can't prove that Abraham existed. They can't prove that Moses existed. They can't even prove the stories around Muhammad who did exist, the stories surrounding him that are true. We can't find their heaven. We can't find their hell. Yeah, none of it is real. This is the fake time. Yeah, because they are the mothers and fathers of fakeness. They are the mothers and fathers of anti-nature. Yeah, BBL City. You understand? But I'm a Christian, but I've got a BBL, not me personally. That's what I'm saying. So you want to alter yourself. You want to alter your natural temple. Did God not do a good enough job? Yeah, we didn't have this concept of beauty and ugly in our culture. I think we explained this before. If you are the mother, let's say just say mathematically, you're the mother, you're 3. The father is a 5. The 2 of you come together, you produce a being that's 8. That is the correct, you understand, sum or calculation between those 2 coming together and producing the new third, which is the original triad. You understand what I'm saying? No, God the Father, the Holy Ghost, or whatever the case may be. That is the original triad. You understand? The mum at 1, father, obviously 3. You understand? They produce a new child, a new you at 5. In the same terms of the sacred geometry of the numbers. So you add those 2 numbers together, whatever the result is, if it's born, healthy, and perfect, that's the result. That's the correct. That's mathematically, isn't it? But now, who do you love? Do you love God or do you love the surgeon? You understand? The hand of the surgeon. So you're not happy with what you're saying your parents have produced. So you want to go to the surgeon to get what? In the image and after the likeness of who? What we're reading about here. All of it comes from the beast. Yeah? We've talked about this before, about the blonding of hair. Yeah, the blonding of hair. How is it that what is beautiful is you in a diseased state? That must be a mental illness. Now, wear your hair whatever makes you feel beautiful. But where is your beauty, you in a lessened state, a diseased state? If a person basically who has dominant genes overstood, yeah, and then basically in-house or for in one way or another received recessive genes, it would produce that type of albino type of effect, wouldn't it? You understand? So that which is dark now becomes, which was black or dark in color or in tone, would now become, if you were black, well, I mean, the Jamaicans use the term dundus, but it's albino. Yeah, the albino look to that, in a sense, not to be offensive to anybody, but the albino look to that would be that hair would turn yellow. And the further recessiveness of that, double recessiveness, is that the curly hair would then become straight fur. So that's us in a diseased state. Now, some people are born that way. That's fine and that's cool for their lineage and their species of human being. But why would you imitate the diseased version of you and say, well, that's beautiful? And how they pay people a lot of money, you understand, within the media to show that type of vibration. You understand, when someone gets successful, all of a sudden now, footballer, in the media, they're blonde in their hair. You understand? A very famous person at one point, I think it was Beyonce, it was Black Power 1 minute. Now, in the country vibes, it's not country on the black side, it's country with blonde wigs and straight fur. You understand? So these things obviously affect emotionally millions of people programmed into the subconscious mind. You understand? And so, you know, it's not a bash on particular women or that type of people. I'm saying it affects all of us now, men and women, in terms of that side of things. But as we're coming into a knowledge of who and what we are, and in some instances, money's not a problem for certain people, what are we doing with the money? Now we don't have to worry about where our next meal's coming from, or do you understand? So these basic things for survival. Are we creating our own? Are we reversing those images of beauty? Or because someone's got a check at the end of it, we're now enhancing them. We're now doubling down, understood, with the spell and still promoting these images. When we've got capability to make movies, we've got capabilities to retell certain stories, we've got money now in some of these instances, yeah, but yet still enhancing the same spell-like story. That to if a person sat back and looked back, how would you be imitating a disease and say, well, this is the image of beauty that we want to portray? You understand? Now we're altering ourselves, overstood, changing our natural vibration. So when a person speaks, listen, you can be over the weight that you're supposed to be or under the weight that you're supposed to be. And it's going to change the way you sound. Yeah, because the tempo is not correct. But imagine now you start using the surgeon's interpretation of what is beautiful or what that's. There's no correlation to your next level of spiritual journey. So a person altering the vibration of their body is going to throw off their tonation. How difficult is it for the person to be able to transform when they're given the sacred tones or the sacred words? Yeah, and then it doesn't work for you because you've altered your tone that works uniquely for your system. The big thing, you understand that when the sperm hit the ovum and created you, is a unique tone. It ties in even to the music that you like if somebody was to analyze it, you understand, digitally or scientifically, which is why, you understand, now when you get your Spotify's, your Apples and all that kind of stuff, it's sitting there thinking, okay, well, we can analyze the type of music the person likes and recommend stuff that they adhere to. This is something that came out the master teacher's mouth made several decades ago, talking about what it means. So yeah, I like this in terms of musical tone. You understand? Because it's tying in, as I say, to the science of you. And people are choosing, but out of ignorance, spiritual ignorance, to, as I say, change your potential of how you may gravitate towards the sequel, yeah, for the beauty, the fake beauty of this world. No, the fake beauty of this world. Yeah? So this is the type of problems that you'll be having to reverse and see. But this hopefully, this new cycle information, as it gets out there, people obviously will be able to internalize it, and then it changes the story and the outcomes and the fate that they're trying to put upon us of self-destruction as opposed to self-preservation. So we can see that when we came back from Sirius and Sabatat, Sirius and Sabatat and Sa'at, in terms of Orion, when we first incarnated here under Project 24, we manifested as hermaphrodites. In fact, conjoined twins and then separated out into two separate genders. Understand? But here, these gatekeepers, of course, are important because the chromosomal configuration of a hermaphrodite neutral gender being and a hermaphrodite neutral gender being is a sort of XYX configuration, YXX. You understand? These types of configuration. An extra chromosome means they vibrate over and above that of the normal human being, and in combination with the golden children are able to open up certain gateways. Understood? Which basically allows us to shift dimensionally, you understand, or even return back to our original home planet in an instance, not traveling by way of craft or ship, but traveling obviously into dimension, another form of our technology that's used, where you can then avoid some of the calamities that are due to befall this planet. In the same, got to think now, there's a large meteorite called Apophis on its way here, understood, due to arrive around 2030 plus, and it's potentially another extinction level event. You understand? So we obviously were able to survive in previous times. We were around when the dinosaurs were here and they were wiped out 17.5 or 25 million years ago. Do you understand? And so we survived that. And other large meteorites which have hit the planet, causing these type of extinction level events, at least for the surface life forms. So we're coming up to that time again where we're going to have to develop ourselves to be able to find solutions to survive. I mean, they've caused us to miss certain key dates of transformation, which our ancestors have put in place for us, understood for this next level of not only evolution but survival. But the Mukasu, in its way, obviously is there to hinder. Yes, if I'm going down, you are going down with me. Yeah, that's the mindset. Yeah, and so we provide a protection for them because, let's say, we're still in and around them. Yeah, still struggling. You know what I mean, with 9 to 5 and survival, etc., and not able to see through all of that into the destiny that awaits you for being you. Yeah? So 110. These Sadakat truths were all but Daju, lost to you. 111. Yet after 6,000 of the 24,000 years, the time had come, Yaanuwn, again for the renewal of your Kasas story. 112. The incipience of all was once one people, Nagaru, Negroids. The Wahan first and will be the last. All others come from you. 113. This is confirmed a cat tail like a cat, actual fact by DNA. 114. You are the elect of heaven who was delivered from Tafbar, destruction 6,000 years ago. 115. A one kind of Salau race. 116. The purest, the healthiest, Gahasu people on the Kawak Taha planet Earth. 117. The Wahakadadu, unique gods, deities of the planet Earth. 118. No other people having nappy or kinky wabar hair, and in fact, the only Salau race with hair. 119. All others share having farah fur like animals. You understand? So I think it was some video I was watching the other day, some TikTok video where a Caucasian lady with a mixed race child brought the child into a Caucasian hairdresser, and she obviously had, kinky or nappy bar hair. You understand? And basically, the Caucasian woman was like, "Well, I don't know what to do with this." The woman, the daughter sitting there, I don't know what to do with this. And obviously, this Caucasian hairdresser was there talking about, "Yeah, I wouldn't know what to do with this either," like it was a negative thing. Yeah, and obviously talking about obviously straightening her hair to produce fur. Yeah, when we see it on animals, we say it's fur. Yeah, so the same shape, texture. When we see it on animals, is fur. Yeah, so the only true people with hair is us, and so the problem is that you're getting, you understand, or in that instance, a hair which was a straight hair, a genetically inferior hair, recessive hair, is considered to be beautiful. And rather than find in this day and time, a hairdresser who can handle and manage and beautify that type of hair, the hair just needed, let's be honest, anybody see the video, it needed some proper moisturizing and proper products, which, if you're going to have a mixed race child as a Caucasian woman, at least learn that part. You understand? That's the least you can do in it. So this is the type of thing, but obviously what psychological damage now would be into that person or the child, you understand, by seeing that their hair is difficult to manage. You understand? This is all the excuses. It's difficult to manage. It takes too much work. Da, 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 da. If you look at the word relax, if you look at the word relax, well, relax is the opposite of strong, isn't it? And so I'm relaxing the hair, or I am, you understand? I'm making the ray part of it lax. You understand? Yeah? The ray part, the sun part. Yeah, because as the sun shines on our hair, it tightens the curl, isn't it? It's an antenna. Yeah, and it's one of the hieroglyphs. You understand? That curl or whatever is the end symbol, you understand, for Nupu. So it's an antenna, isn't it, for us to connect with the cosmos. So this is what we're saying to you. Certain things that we're giving up for compliance or to fit in with this society is detrimental. When we talked about things being for or against us, which is the last test of knowledge, is it for or against me? You understand? And so everything is not one vibration as it applies to different species of human beings on the planet. You understand? So yes, in city life, in nation life, or whatever, you're living in, people follow the same laws and rules, but they're the last thing that they want to do. They don't want to admit, isn't it, on a DNA level, that they're different, because the world would then see many of the deficiencies that they're born with in comparison to other races. You can't blame us for that. You understand? That's down to your gods or your extraterrestrial overlords. You need to take that matter up with them. You understand? There's nothing to do with us. And you can't hate us for pointing it out, understood, in order to find out who we're supposed to be. You understand? So when we didn't know none of this information, we worked with your lies of beauty. Do you understand? We worked with the way you told the story, understood, yeah, and tried to make the best of it. But now the truth and the true information must come out now. Well, truth must prevail, false things must perish. It's going to work to everybody's benefit if we know the facts. We can't solve the cancer of racism based on lies. You can't solve the cancer of racism by getting us to, I don't know, diminish ourselves so you can continue to live how you want to live. No, you've been brain dirtied. We've been brain dirtied. You've been brainwashed. We need to get to a point of situation where actual facts is at the heart of, the way we move forward and make decisions. You can't impose your deficiency. Get us to ignore deficiencies because you don't want to look bad. You understand? That's not the way forward if we're going to have justice, equality, and real liberty. And so going forward, obviously there was a ruling this week, or certainly in England, last week or whatever, which to do with, I think, transgender people, I think, losing a particular case in the Supreme Court in the UK, where it basically said that a woman, by version of the law, is a biological woman, double X chromosome. Do you understand? And so this has meant that certain women-only spaces, as far as the law is concerned, can only be housed by biological women. So obviously, trans communities fighting and saying, well, this is discriminatory against us, etc., etc. But this is why, obviously, the problem is in the UK, for example, there's no culture. So balance certain things out, and there's no sort of, group of elders or different people from different walks of life sitting maybe in a sort of forum debating the ethics of changes. You understand? So the problems that these types of issues, of course, arise from. Now, part of the approach to some of the solution for this was that certain aspects of the trans community and those who were more sympathetic to them wanted women to diminish themselves by getting you to say, well, we're women and you're not really your ability or capabilities as women should be diminished so that we can live more freely. You understand? But there's complexity around that, isn't there? So the fact of the matter is that when we understand, there are certain things when we're having a genetic discussion, you need mature people in the room, and the statements of the master teacher. But it has to be based on fact first. It can't be based upon certain things that we would like things to be over reality. You understand? So, what we started to see a lot of the time was a change in language. So they would say, oh, well, that's a cis female, that's cis this, cis male, all these kind of things. Changing the language to suit you. But the reality of the situation is that you have some things in nature which are defects, and you have some things in nature which are it's optimum. You understand? So a woman born a woman is meant to be that, isn't it? certain chemical configurations if it's a male to female birth situation, then we understand that obviously the amount of iron a man has in his body versus the amount of zinc will determine the type of chromosome that gets donated X or Y. So if there's zinc, more zinc in his system than iron, then he's going to donate a Y chromosome. There's more iron in his body at the time of ejaculation than zinc, then he's going to donate an X chromosome. So a woman obviously is going to be born out of that. If it's a double X, then a woman's going to be born with XY, male's going to be born. These are part of the rules of nature. You can't change them by some policy change, etc., and things of that nature. So you have to work your solution, whatever works best for everybody, based off of that. Now, obviously, when you're dealing with a trans person, then you're dealing with a scenario situation, not saying it's not natural, but it's arising from an issue that's happened chemically, obviously, in the mother, usually basically when they've been under some undue stress during the pregnancy. And we have to understand, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, that just because a lot of babies are born and the medical technology is such that a lot of women, it will be very unusual. I'm saying it doesn't happen, it does happen. But for women to die in childbirth doesn't mean that the process is not complicated and fraught with some difficulties if not managed correctly. So if a woman's stressed during this period, in a sense, it can alter chemically, understood, what should have taken place. So a person can be born, as I say, with that deficiency, you understand, i.e., internally, or chemically, so hormonally, the person is female inside, but they're in the body of a male, or vice versa. Do you understand? So they are hormone sexuals because something has happened, as I say, chemically within the system. So does it mean it's not natural? Well, it's natural. Of course it is. Like somebody being born with bad eyesight. It's naturally occurring, but it just happens to be that something's gone slightly wrong in the birthing process. But it is what it is. Do you understand? But does that mean then women should not? But a woman, for example, is not a defect. Whereas in that trans situation, it's a defect. I mean to say, if medical technology got to a point where we could detect that in the womb when it happens, and the doctors were able to say, listen, there's a chemical imbalance here, which means that the person's going to be born in this way, and the parents got an opportunity to say, okay, depending on the risk that's involved, if the doctor was able to say, listen, we can correct this, there's a 1% chance that it doesn't go the way it's supposed to, and it puts your baby's life at risk. Do you want us to affirm the correction or to leave it? You understand? Now, the parents got a decision to make, isn't it? If the technology was in place to do that, the parents have a decision to make. Now, it could be to the point where, you understand, where the technology is so reliable and sophisticated that if a parent opted not to implement it, it could be considered abuse because you're allowing the child to be born with the defect, you understand, when you had the opportunity to correct it. We're not at that point yet where there's even proper understanding of these things. But eventually, that defect, the point I'm making is that medical technology, once it gets to a certain point, that defect could be, in inverted commas, eliminated. But you're not going to eliminate a woman from being a woman. That's not a defect. Whereas in that trans situation, it's a defect that could be eventually, when it's eliminated, then you wouldn't have it for that reason, at least, anyway. Understood? So, and who wants to be born in the situation that they're having? It's a difficult situation. Imagine you're there in feeling that you're in the wrong body, but it's hormonal issue. Hormones obviously communicate messages clearly around the body to the brain. So yes, it's a feeling. I feel like a woman, but I'm not physically, you understand, a woman in that context. Of course, it must be a very difficult situation to live with, but you can't impinge your rights against the person's rights. I mean to say, you are a woman until you're not. You understand? So somebody can call you a woman, they can, you understand, you can dress like a woman, you can do anything a woman does until the point where you're not. Same like a person maybe in a wheelchair. They can do anything an able-bodied person can do up until the point where you can't. You understand? Until medical technology reaches the point of being able to resolve that issue, maybe at some point in the future, people have to learn to live with their limitations. You understand? If I'm 5'8", you understand? I can't act like I'm 6 foot. You understand? If 6 foot, there's more benefit to being 6 foot. Now I'm 5'8". I've got to accept the fact I'm 5'8" and live as a 5'8" person. I can't live as if there's extra height now. So the person who's 6 foot must act like their height. There's no height difference. It's not reality. You understand? So certain people have to accept the limitations, and if you're born with a defect, at a certain point, you have to accept the limitation of the environment. The reason why it becomes an issue or challenge for us is that because of certain monotheistic homophobia, let's classify it as that for the thing, it may be that certain Muknashtatu or Muknashu, hermaphrodites, hermaphrodites, or these gatekeepers who maybe have double these double chromosomes in a sense, so double the vibrational rate of a normal human being, get caught up in alternative lifestyle, let's say, because they don't have a proper understanding of who they are because there's poor information out there. In a sense, they don't realize that they are a unique set of people who are not hormone sexuals, but rather this is a very unique configuration, usually born at the fifth week, fifth hour, fifth, you understand? Excuse me, fifth week, fifth day, fifth hour, instead of fifth second, you understand? Fifth moment, where this type of configuration, or unique configuration, is born, or let's say birthed, which is naturally occurring. Yeah, neutral gender individual, say, ties back into what we originally were. So a lot of controversy on homosexuality, different things of that nature. Really, what people do in their bedrooms is no concern of us. That's very different to the agenda that's being pushed, which is around population control. You understand? Which is why you're seeing the media programs, every other program, etc., flooded with the kind of LGBTQIA type agenda. You understand? Yeah, but for those who are born that way, nothing you can do about it. It's what it is. You understand? Defects happen in nature. Boom, live how you got to live. You understand? Is it a lifestyle option? It will sabat? No, because you wouldn't say that if somebody had bad eyesight, for example, you wouldn't say, well, that's an option that you want to pursue. But if it happens, you live with it and you progress. You understand? So in a similar way, in ancient times, it's not a lifestyle option that was promoted, but if you're born that way, that is who you are, live accordingly. Do you understand? But it's not an option like maybe how some people want to choose, oh, well, I'll be that, I'll be this, I'll be that, I'll be this. No, you're born, live with it, make the best of the opportunity for it. And in certain things as well, it's not the most efficient way to produce children. It adds more risk, there's more danger, and then I suppose the ethnic lineage as well, it becomes complicated how you achieve that in those situations. But hey, it's one of those things you learn to live with and adapt, but not how it's being promoted, as I say, in this situation, and promoted to kids, all this kind of thing. Hey, you know what I mean? Because there's other things going on where it's not, everything is not exactly how it appears to be. You have to have good understanding of it as well. Some things as well, children or us being a universe, there's others, when a person dies, for example, the spirit of an individual can house a child, for example, up to 9 years. If the person, for example, died in an accident and tragically, for example, and they get to live out through another child for the first 9 years to exist in the physical environment before they properly transition. So you can have children, for example, that are in housing the spirit of another. The person could have been another gender while they were here. You understand? And it may appear to the child's expressing certain views, etc., which may appear to the untrained eye like gender confusion. It's not gender confusion. It's just that another spirit is in housing that child, in a sense, as as agreed through natural law, but that spirit will leave at age 9, and the person will revert back to their, you understand, the gender which they were born with. So you can have issues, metaphysical issues, which are not understood about us, obviously, as human beings, which is the physical side, the spiritual side, obviously, our etheric side, all operating, you understand? And if there's not proper knowledge, right wisdom, right understanding, incorrect decisions are being made, you understand? And so the Caucasian, unfortunately, or those in control at the moment, do not have this information in a sense, or if they do have it, they keep it hidden to control the masses. You understand? And this is the problem that you're facing here. Yeah, is that, say, we talked about earlier, is spiritual ignorance. Understand? And so we need to understand or protect these gatekeepers when they're coming and maybe some adverse morals or lack of understanding of how the makeup of us as human beings, yeah, might constrain the person's ability to be quite open with who and what they are, and because some outdated moral perception of how we view sex in that regard. So listen, a lot of things in a bedroom are never going to lead to a child being born. Those are facts. We're keeping it 100 as adults. So as long as, if you're not that way inclined, as long as someone's not stepping to you asking you for your phone number, it's not really a problem. Do you understand? So, but what is the problem is the population control agenda, which we need to be mindful of. Now, if there's any questions, through. So the pig was the pig was created to eat dead Caucasians, right? To clean up the dead bodies, in the environment. That is what it was formulated for. So rats have an incredible immune system. You understand, pretty much can deal with most diseases. The cat was used for not its intelligence, but its hygiene, to keep it keep itself quick. Cats quite intelligent, and dogs, or the canine was utilized maybe for its maybe lack of intelligence in that regard. But that combination produced the pig, and to say it was used for that purpose. Now, interestingly enough, when we some of the so a true Caucasian, you understand, true Caucasian, there's a lot of people on the planet are not really Caucasian, you understand? So, or not really white, as we would use the term white race, you understand? So, really, a person who's truly white is, this sort of blonde hair, blue eyes, and they have the recessive genes, so they are Rh negative blood type, you understand? So they are, so that's what really a truly definition of a Caucasian is. But a lot of people have been brainwashed into thinking they're white, and so clearly their groups of overlords or extraterrestrials wanted to wipe them out. So that's one of the reasons for this COVID-19 or COVID-19 or certain diseases, certainly in the last cycle, diseases which have been introduced into the genome to try and eliminate that particular configuration type, you understand? And it relates back to some of the genes and elements that we use to make them up, you understand? So you've seen swine flu, haven't you? Yeah, you've seen bird, you've seen bovine flu, you understand? You've seen all these different types of food that relate to certain types of animals that we use in the makeup or the creation of this kind of man. You understand what I'm saying? Simian flu. You've seen these types of things, and obviously, what they wanted to hide with the COVID stuff was that that basically the disease in itself was obviously would be transmitted. One of the ways it was transmitted was through cats and dogs, obviously, with their beloved or love of dogs, you understand? on the way we've been to eliminate diseases, like if it happens with others, is a cull, correct? Yeah, they will cull that particular animal. See it with we see let's call it mad cow disease or whatever. They cull large amounts of these animals, don't they? See birds, they cull, yeah, large amount of these things. But their beloved dog now, if that was to be the root of spreading that particular disease, they didn't want to eliminate those. So that will cause a panic for people that would have done that. And so obviously putting people at risk as a result. So there are these diseases which are being introduced into the genome to try and wipe out this particular configuration of what is being called a Caucasian. You understand? By their overlords, yeah, because of the problems that they've created in the last 6,000 years. Yeah, they can't be controlled or ruled. You understand? That wild ass for man genes that you're seeing there. So let's continue to read. So it says, all others share, 119, all others share having fur like animals, 120. You of the little people and the tall people, your land, the most holy land. Afaf Reye Ta'a, in a sense, Afaf from Reye, sun, Ka'a, spirit, in a sense. So from the sun spirits, in a sense, the new cycle name for Africa. Yeah. So we're the ones protected by Parnatharu, the Nathars, yeah, Natiru. 121, the Abab, heart of the planet. 122, the Kabat, center of all life, the birthplace of all. 123, the Saka'a, land of riches. 124, the true Middle East, Middle West being America. Understand? So we broke that down previously. That when you draw a line through the center of the planet, remember it goes through Africa. Understand? This is a true. Africa's in the middle. So you have east of the middle, and then you have west of the middle. Because no one else. But where? How can you have middle of east? Doesn't make any sense. You see what I'm saying? So part of the story has not been told, which is that the real west was really Egypt to the west. Yeah, hence Harlem, Kentucky, King Tut City, and these types of things. And then Memphis, yeah, that's we've touched upon, I think, previously as well. 125. The Gharab west is on one side and Arabia the east on the other side. 126. It was also inundated. 127. The great mountain to the south, the land there where there is good and about gold, and much Masarat diamonds, was not covered by the waters. 128. There were some who struggled harder and were more disciplined because this was their home. Africa. 129. But others were Wahashu, beasts like their forefathers. 130. A Jared, wicked offspring of creatures and giants from the beasts of the field. 131. These flesh-eating creatures, madmen, came out of the caves and the hillsides and crossed the great void in boats from Europe to Asia to Africa with the desire to rape, kill, and steal. 132. There were many sub-tribes of Celtics, the Yaanuwn, cursed ones. 133. They were and are still brutal barbarians, 134. Uncivilized, wild beasts, like Zazaz, men in flesh. So you see cleanup gangs in effect, isn't it? Because when you look on Netflix and Amazon, they got series like Vikings and other programs now, which are sort of giving the history of these Vikings or the six kings or six kinsmen or clansmen, different tribes of Celtics, and trying to sort of clean them up a bit. There is some savagery in there, but they're making them look better than they previously they're not better than the real story of history. Do you understand? Now, as I say, these are killers, yeah, leashed into the environment, yeah, and so as we see, they rape, kill, steal, yeah, not share, take, conquer. Yeah, that's that mindset, that mentality that their overlords created within them. And I suppose the issue or challenges as well is that those Pleiadians believed that, or in terms of their design, is that you develop through conflict. You understand? So the modus operandum of their evolution to bring out the potential in this creature, or that was their plan at least, was that they developed through war. You understand? And which to some degree, if you look at uh, technological evolution, so certainly in the last 200 or so years, a lot of medical advancement and technological advancement has arisen out of war. That's the nature of their God or overlord. That's the nature of the God of the Bible, the Allah of the Quran. Do you understand? That's the mindset. Understood? Yeah, develop through conflict, through warring. Yeah, a lot of technological advancements, mental manipulation advancements, in fact, through the Tavistock Institute in the UK, and names are escaping me from the American one, but the Tavistock Institute about understanding psychology, how the human brain and sort of emotional center reacts under pressure of war, and they've utilized this to manipulate and control human beings as a result. You understand? And all these things have risen out of learning from conflict and wars in that regard. Do you understand? So this is something by design that they wanted, until this being that they created could no longer be controlled. Yeah, so 134. So the American version of the Tavistock Institute is the Stanford Research Institute. It's not Tavistock Institute. The American equivalent is the Stanford Research Institute, and so these are it's kind of hidden institutions, say hidden, but sometimes have hidden agendas where, like in war and things of that nature, they study the psychology of human beings in order to develop mechanisms that allow mass manipulation. And so, and I understand that human beings are connected or can be connected emotionally and mentally, and you can utilize the media, for example, to create large-scale shifts in behavior. You understand? In that regard. So this is spoken about in a book called Leviathan 666, the revised version. You understand? So, and it's interesting. You see the same thing in the Bible, where the God of the Bible is the creator of the problem, but also then becomes the savior. Do you understand? Of the same issue that he created. Do you understand? And you see that a lot in this society today, where the human brain can only take a certain amount of chaos. You understand? And if it's too much chaos, it can cause a mental breakdown, or you'll have people calling out for order, you understand, in a situation where there is a lot of chaos, but the makeup of that order could be detrimental to, you understand, a particular group or society. Do you understand? But they would call for the very thing that could be detrimental for them. So let's say some urban situations, for example, let's say media promotion of certain incidents, whatever, let's say it's knife crime or whatever happened in a particular location. Well, it's the police's responsibility, isn't it, to maintain the law understood in certain areas. Do you understand? Now, in some of these areas, they will say, well, the reason why we can't do what we want to do is because we would do you stop and search, for example, but yeah, we can't stop such and such because it makes us appear like we're racist or whatever the case may be. So they try and blame the community the job that they're paid to do and they're supposed to be doing in a particular area. So if too much of a certain type of, let's say it was constantly being reported in the media, constantly being reported, you understand, that people in that area would get to a certain point where the chaos was so much, yeah, that they would put the brain into a psychological syndrome they refer to as future shocks. And in that state, understood psychologically, the brain requires order. So the people that might call for, let's say, armed police in, that situation, which is unusual for Britain, unusual for other areas around the world, but it's unusual for the UK. And so they would call for the very thing where police may be around, black people can't be trusted with guns, because of certain mind frame or the way they perceive threat or the way they're intimidated because of the color of certain people's skin. They're not making protect and serve decisions. They're just making protect decisions to protect them. You understand? So dealing with their insecurities, which can lead to innocent people getting killed. You understand? But the point being made is that that's a phenomena. Let's say, for example, that Tavistock Institute, excuse me, the Stanford Research, Institute, whatever. These are the types of things that have been covered from studying, you understand, human beings who have come out of war situations, you understand, and how they then manipulate that to manipulate the masses. So let's continue. So it says uncivilized 134, uncivilized wild beasts like as men in flesh. 135, living savagery. 136, as they sailed and mixed by rape, there became many sub-races of Caucasoids. Again, that book, 18 plus 18 plus 1 of 37 genes in the mitochondrial DNA. I think an earlier part of this class went through that migrational spread and the different how it's reflected in the names of the different countries, what type of mixing or what type of rape took place. They have countries, for example, that end in land, like Ireland, England, Scotland, Switzerland, and that's a certain type of rape and mixing that took place. You have countries that end in IA, you understand? So India, Persia, you understand? And countries that end in IA. You have countries that end in Stan, Afghanistan, Pakistan. This talks of the type of mixing that took place as these wild ass man of Celtics or Caucasians, you understand? Then spread, came out of the caves and the mountains, and then descended down and started to, as I say, spread their DNA under instruction from their overlords across Europe and other places. So, saying here that sub-races who carry their genetic animal Chalea diseases. 137. Many Kabbalian tribe names of the same race: Vikings, Gauls, Germanic, Scandinavians, Gaels, Druids, Brits, Scots, Poles, Anglos, Franks, Wiccans, Dutch, Danish, Icelanders, Swedes, Spaniards, all of the Canaanite tribes, their biblical name for them. Palmubrasu, the lepers. 138, they hate the Haradu, children of the Sabatat, Wu, Sa'ahat, Sirius and Orion, yet they need their Daman blood or they will die off. So this is what your kidnapping or slavery was about, not about labor, and not about picking cotton. It's about blood. The lack of vitamin K in the bloodstream. The hemophiliacs out of Europe. You understand, when it's all about blue-blooded, or the royal blood, that's because they were hemophiliacs. They lacked the ability to clot in their blood. Do you understand? And so this is what, that's where your Dracula myth and other things come along. It's out of this desire to sustain themselves. You understand? Which you have to, is at least every 7+ years, you must mix in with others with stronger genes in order to survive. So 139, they must mix in with the Kasheshkur, Salalu, darker races, or they will fade off. 140. So they seek out Africa for your blood, and Afafraye Ka'au Africans, yeah, Nagaru Negroids, the holy bloodline on earth, the one and only true Gadadu deities, gods. Now, 141. Your continent, Afafraye Ka'a Africa, was undulated and forested and richly fertile with resources and minerals. 142. A land of plenary of rivers, marshes, and mists. 143. And Taba'at, nature put you on the best part of the Kawaktaha, planet Earth, with all you would ever need. 144. Yet know of that dreadful Zamam day that was in the past, and recognize that the water cycle has come again upon on you all again. So this is what we're talking about with this, impending meteor that could, let's say, hit the planet or due to arrive here around 2030 or early 2030s. So even if it passed close to the planet, its size would effectively cause serious climatic changes on the planet Earth. And obviously, that movie, isn't it? Bruce Willis. I think there was another one with Morgan Freeman at the time, isn't it? I think one was called, what was it called? Meteor. I can't remember what it's called. But, the two films about a meteorite strike. In the sense, we were watching it as movies, 20 odd years ago, and now that same situation is upon us. And obviously, I think they're sending out. You've seen them sending out, isn't it, various different rockets and things. I think one of them is called Osiris, interesting enough, to try and divert the course of this thing. So whilst it's in the media, but then kind of not, if that makes sense. And so we're at that time again where the planet is obviously at risk of these changes, and where we have to come together as a people in order to prepare, for whatever option is necessary, to avoid these climatic changes, because one of our people must be here. We're part of the glue, let's say, that holds this solar system together, so we must exist. And this is why in ancient times, certain aspects of our genetic lineage was protected in order to replenish the earth again. Of course, once the climatic changes, at least the surface damage, had passed to a point where human beings could live again on the surface, and start to then rebuild which was damaged. Okay, cool. So great, we've got ourselves to a nice ending point where we've just reviewed part one from everything that we spoke about previously. And then when we get into the next class, I told you we'll get to part, it's been ambitious. Get to the part two, where we go into a bit more of the relationship to Sirius star constellation, talk a little bit more about the our relationship to Sirius star constellation and how it's evidence in other cultures on the planet, and get into a little bit about some of our genetic past and our lineage, obviously from the waters of this planet onto obviously the highly sophisticated human body that we find ourselves today. But it's gone through a lot of changes in terms of its evolution or growth into the form that we see it in today. And not everybody's pathway on the planet, of course, as you now understand, is the same. And so different races have a different evolutionary pathway, which is not the same as you as Negroes, Nagaru, or Africans. And that's by design. So different races register on different frequencies in the vibrational range, and that, as I say, allows us to communicate and receive information from our ancestors. There's no mix and blend when it comes to that, so certain messages are not interfered with by forces that will seek to take advantage, as I say, of spiritual and etheric capability, energy diversion. Okay, any questions before we close? No. Okay, been fairly quiet audience today, so must mean that we're clear on people paying attention. So we're back in 2 weeks' time. It may be the continuation of this class or something else. We'll see how it goes. If not, we'll definitely be back with this to continue this class in the session in June. But it may be that they continue in, I think, intelligent design class in the next 2 weeks. So look out for any adverts that are appearing. This class, we'll put that up on our YouTube channel. Starting to reverse index a lot of the classes, because obviously sometimes people just want to clip in at certain points, clarification, certain questions. So bear with us, having to reverse engineer that into a lot of classes to get those indexing right, so you can click in and see what that looks like. This class was called I Was There, which is here. Yeah, based on part 1 and 2, Partarak. So check out the website if you want to see those books. United Sapiens Worldwide .com. Also, I was going to say, got out my head. Yeah, it's got out my head for a second. I was going to say something else, but yeah. So check out that books. We'll be back, say, either 2 weeks' time. If not, I'll be definitely here for the next one. If it's not me in 2 weeks' time, then it'll be somebody else. I think they're doing intelligent design. So continuation of that class next month. Yeah. So as I say, we'll be indexing stuff on YouTube, help promote the channel, get the information out there. Yeah, and sort of resources there. So some people wanted to read part 1 to 9. Probably difficult because they're 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours of length. But we'll add this one on, but there'll be a final part to hopefully round out this set of classes. And then in terms of myself as teaching, I'll move on to another subject in the vast knowledge and array of information put out by Dr. Malachi KZ York. So shout out to him, shout out to you, family, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for joining today. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.